Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey everybody, this is the Digital Asset Investor, and I wanted to inform you that this is not a troomer that I'm about to show you. This was going around earlier today, just in reportedly Ripple and SEC to hold undisclosed meeting on May the 8th, unconfirmed source. And then I had retweeted it and asked Eleanor Terrett, and John Deaton said, I'm willing to bet this is false. SEC lawyers and Ripple lawyers could meet anytime they so desire. I don't think they would pick a date a week from now and then leak it out. I agree. But here's what is 4 days out, and that is XRP Las Vegas. And I was gonna, you can go to this at xrp-lasvegas.com. Brad Combs from Digital Perspectives is putting it on. You can get, he's got these, he's sold out. Let me see if that's where you click. He's sold out, but he does have streaming tickets where you can go and get streaming tickets. And I'm not making any money off this or anything. I'm just making you aware of it. If you're not able to go, you'll be able to watch that. So check this out. FDIC allowed JP Morgan. We talked about that, I think, in the last video. But they literally let JP Morgan break the rules to do this.
I think that's the key point you just made, because there were other banks in there over the weekend. And if you think about it, at the end of the day, ultimately what the FDIC chose here is to allow JP Morgan to take over more than 10% of the deposits of the United States of America. So there was a special exemption there. That tells me that it was a little bit of a desperation situation where I guess the bids from US Bank Corp and PNC were so low. In other words, those banks are not really, I don't think they were strong enough. I mean, our clients, a lot of our clients around the world don't think those banks were strong enough to do this deal. So at the end of the day, you had...
I think it's different. I think it's more like they're trying to consolidate into one or two or three or five huge banks.
If those banks in the Eurodollar system are creating fewer and fewer dollars, that's going to create a global economic crisis, a global economic depression, and that's where the dollar most likely loses significant value against goods and services in the United States, while gaining value, which would be a big, big problem, because then instead of having businesses default, you're having whole countries default because of the amount of dollar-denominated debt. You see, and I think they believe that the solution for that is just the exact same solution that would be domestically, that if you have Silicon Valley Bank go bust, if you have Signature, then let's just move everything to the central bank's balance sheet. But if you have the global economy basically going bust, you have countries going bust because they're dependent on this banking system and the dollar, well, let's just get rid of that and let's just move that onto the central bank's balance sheet as well, because that is infinite. It can have negative equity, and those banks can't go bust. So you get into this weird world that from a wholesale standpoint, a retail standpoint, we're moving into communist Russia, where there's only one bank, and that's it.
So think about what they've done. You've had these people come in and close these banks because they didn't like the fact that they were crypto banks. So all of a sudden, what can you do if most of the banking is done with the big banks? All of a sudden, it's easier to control, just like a communist country. Go figure. Well, there's a couple of ways around that. Two of them are to buy physical gold and have a Glen account, which is not the banking system. A Glen account separate from a bank account. And I'm able to buy gold in there, and I can use my Glint MasterCard debit card. This is one of my sponsors because I like the idea, and the link's in the top of the description. Now, there's a U.S. Supreme Court case that apparently, I saw John Deaton retweet this earlier. It would potentially curb. From what I remember, when a federal agency is suing someone, the standard practice is to lean in the direction of favoring the federal agencies. And my understanding is that this court case could reverse that. As much corruption as we've seen, they better reverse it or we don't have a country anymore. Speaking of not having a country anymore, if we keep letting people like this clown be in Congress, at some point you're not going to have a country anymore, because Bernie Sanders he's recommending that the government should confiscate all wealth over $999 million. So in other words, if you're a billionaire, the government should just take your money that you've earned. If that's not dangerous, I don't know what is, folks, because if they can set as a precedent taking from a billion, that's how these people operate. First, they say, oh, it's just the billionaires because we all hate them. And then they come for everybody else later on because they've got the precedent. These are some evil mofos, okay? Real bad. And here's the tell. You won't ever hear Bernie Sanders say that they should confiscate, which they should do. They should confiscate the wealth. All these politicians that go and they get a $200,000 salary in Congress or whatever, and they're there for 30 years, and all of a sudden they're worth $100 million. That's the wealth they should confiscate, because that's from insider dealings right there. That should be confiscated. So if Bernie wants to confiscate people's wealth, he should confiscate the crooks' wealth that have gone to Congress and made themselves rich with knowledge that the rest of us didn't have. That's who should have their wealth confiscated. IMF chief Georgieva says that over 110 nations are developing CBDCs, and we know that Ripple is working with many of them. That's a fact, Jack. Look at this tweet. Somebody, I don't know how I saw this, but somebody sent it out today. JP Morgan breaks new ground using in-house blockchain technology and JPM coin to compete a live intraday repo transaction. That was December 11th, 2020. Around 10 days later, the SEC would sue Ripple. I got on a JP Morgan kick today, so I wanted to show you this. The clip you're about to see, first I need to explain to you. First, JP Morgan began working with Ethereum. We know that for a fact. JP Morgan was working with, and Goldman Sachs, were working with Ethereum before the launch. Jay Clayton initiates the venture capital working group when he goes to Andreessen Horowitz in January of 2018. That conversation becomes the Bitcoin Ethereum Hinman free pass speech. Jay Clayton sues Ripple while at the SEC. He then immediately leaves the SEC, and one of the companies that he joined was Apollo Global. Christine Moy, who was running JP Morgan's digital assets division, eventually leaves, and she goes from JP Morgan to Apollo Global to run their digital assets division, and she works for Jay Clayton. You can't make this up. Now watch this.
We should mention, of course, you're still settling in at Apollo after leaving JP Morgan. That's right. Month 2. We should mention, of course, you're still settling in at Apollo after leaving JP Morgan. That's right. Month 2 at Apollo from JP Morgan. But just to level set for everybody, Apollo Global Management is a $500 billion alternatives asset manager with over 30 years of experience in public and private equities, fixed income, credit, asset management, and insurance and retirement services. We've entered the digital asset space in a very unique way. On one side, looking to be a real-world practitioner of the technology, and this is kind of where my background at JP Morgan was really applicable, in terms of identifying and driving real-world use cases using blockchain technology, putting real-world assets on chain, and then also investing in the space as well, and hoping to create a flywheel where essentially the companies and protocols that we invest in will...
Flywheel is the same terminology that Ripple used at Ripple Swell in 2019, by the way.
And share our cross-asset markets expertise, helping to make those protocols and companies more successful and therefore our investments more successful. So really exciting platform. So more to come.
All right. And then we had this. Here's Mr. Huber's been hard at work. He's been covering the JP Morgan. Here's the earnings call in the fourth quarter of 2020. Jamie Dimon's being questioned about trying to get ahead in fintech.
Questions that have been asked related to fintech. Jamie, you said you're going to win, right? But based on the valuations of the PayPal and Stripes and Visa, MasterCard, anything that's fintech related, I mean, they trounce the valuation of your stock. So I think the market's saying that others are going to win. So how is JP Morgan going to... I mean, you said Silicon Valley is coming, what? That was like 6 years ago or something, and then each year we say, yeah, we missed it. Well,
no. Mike, we never said we missed it. We've been doing fine the last 5 years. Like, so it isn't like, but I do agree with you. And I gave that to the management team, my whole operating committee, a little deck that showed Visa 500 billion, MasterCard 350 billion, PayPal 220 billion, Net Financial 600 billion, Tencent 800 billion, Alibaba trillion, Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon. You can go on and on, but absolutely we should be scared shitless about that.
So how are you going to win? I mean, just what?
I'm not going to tell you. But we have plenty of resources. A lot of very smart people. We just got to get quicker, better, faster, and that's which we do. We've got we've done an exceptional job. If you look at what we've done, you'd say we've done a good job. But the other people have done a good job too. Some have monopolies virtually, so it's a whole different issue. But
what have I said from the beginning? The Bitcoin Ethereum was a monopoly creation attempt. He seemed there to admire monopolies. Now, this is Christine Moy, who was working for him at the time. Now listen to what she says her function was.
My positioning, I've always been on the side of TradFi, but
TradFi being JP Morgan.
Always to be ready for this new Internet of Value to make sure that we are...
Wait a minute. Who had been using the term Internet of Value for years before that? And she says her job is what?
But always to be ready for this new Internet of Value to make sure that we are the ones that are not disrupted, but in fact the ones that are leading. My positioning, I've always been on the side of TradFi.
My question's real simple. Did JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon get any help from their regulatory friends, their regulator friends, to keep from being disrupted or to stall any potential disruptors? That's my question. Because she left JP Morgan and went to work for Jay Clayton, who happens to be the guy that dropped the lawsuit on Ripple. And don't forget, the guy who's been carrying the torch after he dropped it said this. If I can get it to play, here we go. He said this.
A lot of commercial banks aren't terribly excited about that. Maybe you're going to have to give some ownership. Maybe you'll have to give 50% of your ownership to the 20 banks that are now, part of this.
50% of it. So Gary said, and then don't forget when Gary was on stage with Tim Draper, and he's like, and he has his position's real clear. Who's going to do it better than JP Morgan? So we know whose team he's on. It's all pretty clear this is all very clear to see. If you don't have to open your eyes even all the way to see what's going on here. Then Ryan Selka says Chair Gensler's likely to run for Ben Cardin's Senate seat in Maryland since he has zero shot of ever becoming Treasury Secretary. I will be actively campaigning against him because he's a dishonest public figure and Maryland deserves better. Then this is a good one from Anders L. He says, so with the AMM proposal, it turns volatility into yield, by the words of Schwartz. So then people will buy XRP and lend it to AMM to earn yield. So my guess is that this will create a large XRP pool, and the more volatile XRP is, the larger the pool will be. X pool ? I like the sound of all of that. I'm the digital asset investor. I'm not an investment advisor. This is for entertainment purposes only. Please subscribe, hit the like button, tell your friends and family. X pool ? Thanks.